Hi friends, welcome back to Craft Diaries. My name's Em and this is my monthly podcast where I talk about everything I've been up to in the last month in the crafting world, mainly crochet and a little bit of knitting. I also dabble in some other crafts as well, and I've actually been learning a brand new craft this month. So if you want to find out what that is and what my beginner's journey has been like, then keep watching to the very end of this podcast. But we're going to kick off this podcast with some really exciting news, and that is just before this video went live on YouTube, I released my next crochet blanket pattern. So the day that I am filming this video is Friday the 3rd of November, but you should be seeing it on Saturday the 4th of November. That's when this video is going live on YouTube. That's a day later than I usually post my videos. But I wanted this podcast to coincide with my latest crochet pattern release. So the pattern is the Granny Love blanket. So this is a giant granny square blanket. So if you've not made a granny square before, we start in the center and we work outwards in rounds, bigger and bigger and bigger until we have a giant square for the blanket. This was, I think it was 52 or 54 rounds, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then at the edge we've got this beautiful scalloped border that was inspired by autumn leaves. So the story behind how this blanket came to be is quite a personal one. In 2022, I became a wheelchair user after being able-bodied for most of my life. At the end of 2021, I had developed some chronic health problems and I was essentially housebound, and I had an occupational therapist come out who essentially gave me an NHS wheelchair so I could get out of the house, and it really opened the world back up for me after getting kind of cabin fever. Felt like the walls were closing in on me a little bit the first half of 2022. I'm not gonna lie, it was a pretty miserable time of my life, but that wheelchair really changed my life at that point. But as an able-bodied person, I don't think I ever realised how much, when you're out for a walk in the cold weather, how much that warms you up. Because when you're sat in a wheelchair and you're not doing any exercise when you're out in the cold weather, oh my goodness, it is so cold. You get so cold so quickly. And I'm one of those people that gets cold really easily anyway. So I needed something more than a coat to wear in my wheelchair when my partner was taking me to the park. So that is how this blanket came to be. So I made this blanket last October, so October 2022. Specifically with the idea in mind that this was going to be my lap blanket for my wheelchair to keep me warm in the cold weather. And at the time, it was October, so it was autumnal when we were going for our walks around, it's called a tarn, but basically a man-made pond at the park near us. And that is how this blanket came to be. So this blanket uses 12 autumn-inspired colours of Stylecraft Special Double Knit yarn. I used about 2/3 of the ball of each colour for the square, and then I used about 1.5 balls total for the colour that I used for the border. This colour is Camel. So I'll put the colours that I used on the screen here. And the colour palette was inspired by what I was seeing when I was out in my wheelchair at the parks, appreciating being outside and not stuck in the house and all of those autumnal colours. So I made this blanket and I absolutely loved it. And then I set up early this year, I started doing more crochet tutorials, releasing crochet patterns, things like that. And I set up a Facebook group called Meema Makes Crochet Community, and I wanted to run a crochet along. It was actually someone else's idea who was sort of one of the founding members of the Facebook group from TikTok. And it was their idea to have a crochet along, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So I put up a poll of like some blankets that I've made that I could do tutorials for, and this blanket won by a mile. So this became our very first crochet along in sort of March, April 2023. So that's why it's called the Granny Love blanket, because I love granny squares. I mean, I love my grannies too, but I love granny squares. So that's how this became known as the Granny Love blanket, the Granny Love crochet along. So I do have a lot of free tutorials for this blanket. So I have a tutorial if you've never crocheted before and you want to have a go. I have a tutorial for this blanket. I have one for more experienced crocheters who know the basic crochet stitches for right-handed and left-handed for the giant granny square. I have a right-handed and a left-handed crochet tutorial for the border, and I also have a tutorial on how to weave your ends into a granny square because it can be a little tricky with all these holes in the granny stitch. So I love this blanket so much, and I'm so glad that a lot of people have done as well, and a lot of people joined it in the crochet along. And honestly, it's the 2 crochet alongs that I've run are probably the best things I've done in my journey, in my Meema Makes journey to become a crochet designer and sort of content creator. And yeah, so this blanket holds a really special place in my heart. But I forgot that I was going to write this up as a proper pattern. When we were doing the crochet along, I had a few people say, oh, I'd much prefer this as like a written pattern. I'm happy to pay, but I just want a written pattern. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that during the crochet along, and it never happened. And then I got, oh, now I've got to work out the next crochet along and the next pattern and the next video, and I just never revisited it. And then in the summer, someone messaged me and was like, oh, are you ever going to do a pattern for it? And I was like, oh yeah, I will. I'm not a massively organised person. I'm trying to be with the Meema Make stuff, but I'm not a massively organised person, and I'm a bit ditzy and all over the place. So, but I am trying. So I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. So I did. I wrote the pattern properly. I have a tech editor now. I make sure that my pattern, like I'm developing my style for pattern writing. So this was a really good opportunity to put that into practice and using my layouts. So I wrote up the pattern. I had it tech edited. It went to my group of testers. A couple of hiccups came up, and they said that some of the way that I'd phrased stuff wasn't friendly. Some people sort of made assumptions and mistakes with the pattern, and that helped me realise where I can be clearer in how I'm phrasing my patterns and where sort of photo tutorials need to be. So I went back, I shot a whole photo tutorial for it, I rewrote some of it, went back to them, someone proofread it for me, and they're like, yes, it's fine, ready to go. So the crochet along materials and tutorials are staying where they are staying for free. The only part of this pattern that is now paid is if you want the full written pattern, and I will link the Etsy and Ravelry pages down in the description if that's something you're interested in. Right, let's get on to this fabulous cardigan that I'm wearing, because I'm really excited to talk about it a little bit more. So let's talk about the Sisterhood cardigan. So this is the Sisterhood cardigan. I'm not going to stand up and have a twirl in it. It is a granny square cardigan made up of solid granny squares. I have tutorials and a free pattern for the squares themselves. I'll link down in the description. So yeah, and it's made up of these solid granny squares set on point. I came up with the design when my sister wanted a granny square cardigan for Christmas. She requested it last Christmas because she really wanted one. So this is not her one. Hers I have not shown on YouTube. I don't think she watched my YouTube, but just to be sure, I haven't shown hers. Hers is a stack of squares. I haven't sewn the squares together yet. So if you want to find out a little bit more about the Sisterhood cardigan, I'll link on the screen the last episode of my podcast where I talked a lot about sort of the inspiration behind it, the yarn that I'm using, all of that stuff. Because I've not made a huge amount of progress, I'm not going to go through it all again in this episode. Once I've actually sort of written the pattern up, I will revisit the Sisterhood cardigan and give you all updates. But for the minute, honestly, the Sisterhood cardigan's on the back burner. I've had illness after infection, after illness the last couple of months, like mild things, but I've felt really run down. I've been trying to do 3 patterns at once. So my Granny Love pattern, my daisy crown hat, and the Sisterhood cardigan, and I've been trying to get back on top of all of my YouTube filming because I want to start sort of doing a bit more face-to-face videos alongside the tutorials, and I just think I took on too much. And I wasn't very well, so everything has sort of fallen behind. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. I did, my Granny Love blanket's coming out a month after I said it would, but it's coming out tomorrow. So yeah, so basically the Sisterhood cardigan's on the back burner until this pattern is done. So this pattern was done, and it went to testers, and the testers, my lovely, lovely testers, came back and said I needed 29 different changes. I need a video tutorial for it, and I need more photos. So this is the Daisy Crown hat. It's a crochet design that's also going to be a paid pattern from me. I talked about it a lot in the last podcast. If you want to learn more about this hat, I'll link that podcast back up on the screen again. So that hat is going to be delayed. I'm hoping for release beginning of December because I need to make those 29 changes to the pattern. add photos in and stuff, and then I'm going to have to, because of the sheer number of changes that I'm making to this pattern, I'm going to have to do a second round of testing, which is going to delay it even more. That's sort of my next job after the Granny Love pattern release is get this one back into ready, edited, and then back into testing, and get the video tutorial filmed, because I've decided I'm going to do a video tutorial for it now whilst I'm going to film it whilst my testers are working on it. So essentially, because I've had those 3 patterns on the go, it's been too much. I need to do one at a time. I can only essentially work on Meema makes for about 10 hours a week, and 5-ish of those hours needs to be YouTube and social media content. So I think I took on too much, and I need to pull things back a bit and just do things one at a time. So basically, Granny Love is now almost out. Well, it's at the time of this video, it will be out of the way. And then I've got this to focus on next. And then once this is back into testing, then the Sisterhood cardigan needs to be finished, because my sister needs it for Christmas. And I need to take some photos for it, because I did my sort of button band and my cuffs in black, and the photos in the pattern, they're not very clear. So for my sister's, hers is not going to be black, so that I can show it a bit easier on photos. So that's essentially what's been happening with my patterns. Whilst talking about Meema Makes updates, I said in the last podcast I was going to do another pattern for January for a crochet along blanket, because I love crochet alongs and I've really loved hosting crochet alongs, and we were going to do one in January. That I'm not going to be doing the blanket, as I said before. I talked a little bit about it in the last podcast, but essentially it's in Stylecraft's bamboo and cotton, and this was sort of the pattern essentially, but this is not going to be ready for January anymore. It's probably going to be later in 2024. This is going to be a crochet along. I really, really love this square that I came up with. Wait 1 second. I've got one in a different colour, in a different yarn, so that you can see it. So this is what it looks like in a different colour every round. So we've got a round of single crochet, a round of V-stitches, a round of double crochet clusters, a round of popcorns, a round of treble crochet clusters, and then 2 rounds to square it off, essentially. So that was going to be the crochet along for January, but that's going to have to wait. It's now on the back burner until the Sisterhood cardigan is done. So I've got no idea when that crochet along will materialise. I thought you might like to see, so when I'm coming up with a pattern, I often do lots and lots of samples with yarn scraps and things, and I thought you might like to see some of my Janie Crow on Instagram calls them yarn doodles. They are, because I just sit there with a hook and see what happens. So here are some of my yarn doodles that I went through when coming up with that square. So yeah, so some of these will end up as tutorials and patterns, some of them won't. Here's the one that was sort of the precursor to the final pattern. Ooh, there we go. So you might like to see some of my yarn doodles, seeing as you won't be seeing that blanket for a long time. That blanket's on the back burner probably until 2024 now. So yeah, that's kind of why stuff's been delayed. So yeah, I'm sorry, I need to stop saying I'm going to do things and overloading myself with stuff to do. Lesson learned, one thing at a time in future. So let's talk about the other things I've been up to this month. So we'll talk about knitting next. So I talked a little bit about this in the last podcast as well, and it was, I've got the wrong bag. So I found the right bag. So these are some socks. I've been getting into sock knitting this year. You might have seen that if you've watched my other podcast. I did show you the yarn in the other podcast. It's King Cole cotton socks in a purple and a grey. It's a cotton 4-ply, or if you're American, fingering weight yarn. So he chose the colours. They're not my colours. He wanted purple with grey cuffs, toes and heels, and I have started to, and I've actually just got to the point where, I'll just pull it, and I have just got to the point where I've put in the heel for these socks. They're on 2.25mm circular needles, and I knit them using the magic loop technique. So I'm not using a pattern either. I'm just sort of like, I've made enough socks now that I just know how they're constructed, so I just do it. I'm really disappointed because I did multiple gauge swatches tension swatches, whatever you call it. I measured his feet multiple times. He tried on the cuff as is, and I just went merrily on my way knitting. And then I asked him to, I just put in the heel of both of them. I sort of knit them in tandem. So, and he tried this on and it was too small. My swatches were a lot bigger than what my actual knitting was. I don't know why. So he tried them on, he cannot get them over his heel. So I'm going to have to rip them back. I've been putting off ripping them back because I'm not going to lie, like on 2.25mm needles, these stitches are tiny. You can't really see that, there you go. These stitches are tiny on 2.25mm needles. I mean, look, there's my finger. I can't bear to rip them back. I'm going to have to rip them back and start again with more stitches or on a bigger, maybe go up to a 2.5mm needle. I said to him, I can't bear to start these socks again right now. I think I need a break from sock knitting. So I said, do you mind if I do them for Christmas instead? And he's fine with that. He just wants his socks. He doesn't care when they come. He wants his socks and he wants them to fit well, so he doesn't mind. So yeah, so that's sort of in having a brief hibernation, because I needed to start a different knit project to get sort of socks out my brain, because after dropped needles on the floor. I just needed to get socks out of my brain basically. So I started another knitting project and I'm really excited about this one. So the next knitting project is my third ever knitted cardigan. I've got one finished that needs blocking. I've got one almost finished that also needs blocking, and this is my third one. I should have just finished off the last one, but I just wanted to start something new. Sometimes you just get this urge to cast on or start a new project and you just have to roll with it, and that's what I did with this one. So I'll show you it here. It kind of doesn't really look like a cardigan. I've got yarn everywhere because I've got like multiple bits going. So if I hold this bit up, so here is the neck. So here's the back of the neck, and this is sort of the button band of the V-neck here. And then we've got a sleeve here that's finished, but it's just on some cables. I've not cast off yet. So we've got a sleeve, and then I've got another sleeve partially done. Do you know what? I'm just gonna put this on quickly. So there, that's better. So I've got like this partial sleeve going on this side, and this sleeve is done. I wanted to do usually you knit the body of a cardigan or a sweater first, then you go back and do the sleeves. But I decided to do the sleeves at the sort of before I continue with the body, because I want to use as much of this yarn as possible and I can just keep going with this cardigan. So the pattern is the Field Day Jacket by, I cannot remember the designer's name. It's definitely called the Field Day Jacket. I'll put it on the screen what the name is. So, and it's essentially a cardigan, and it's a really interesting construction. It is stockinette, essentially. It's drop shoulder. You can see sort of there where I've picked up. So it's a drop shoulder, mainly stockinette with this 1x1 rib button band and cuffs. And then I'll just take it off again so I can talk a little bit about how it's constructed, because it's got a really interesting construction. Put this cardigan back on because it's a little bit chilly. So now we've put the cardigan on, I'll talk about it again. So yeah, so it's called the Field Day Jacket. It's got a really interesting construction. So if I turn it over, so this is the back here. So if you can see a little bit here, we've got this sort of like curved line here. So we cast long tail cast on along the backs of the shoulders on the neck to the other back of the shoulder. And then I learnt German short rows, which is a new technique to me, and I love them. I'm never going to do another type of short row, they're so good. So yeah, German short rows to get sort of this sort of curved bit at the back. I don't know how well that comes across on camera, essentially. So I've started here, and then I'm working down in a curve. And then you knit a tab of, well, this is broken ribbing, because I'm not doing 1x1 ribbing because my 1x1 ribbing's really messy because I purl tighter than I knit. So I've done broken rib instead because it looks a bit neater. So yeah, so then you do a tab of ribbing for sort of the back of the neck, and then you pick up a bunch of stitches along here. along here. That's the one side of the cast on, and then you knit sort of this front section, and then you do the same on the other side and knit this section, and then you join the back and the front 2 sections at the armpits, and then you sort of knit down, and then you go back and you pick up stitches for the sleeves. So it's a really interesting construction. I really like it and I love the fit of it. It fits my shoulder so well. I talked a little bit about this with my crochet project that I showed in the last podcast. That's actually, I'll show you next. And I have quite narrow sloping shoulders, so drop sleeves look really nice on my body, but other constructions don't. This fits me so well. This is going to be my go-to plain cardigan pattern because I love how this fits my shoulders. It's so nice. I've played around with row counts and gone back and redone sleeves and things just to sort of like make it the shape I want it to be. The pattern itself is really oversized, and I am a big girl. I have a 48-inch bust. I'm a big girl, and oversized on me is like a tent. So it's not oversized. It's only, I think the recommended ease, so that's how much bigger the garment is to your body, is 10 inches bigger than your body, and that would be a 10 on me. So I'm aiming for sort of 2 to 4 inches, and I think I've achieved that. I love the fit of it. It has meant I've ripped it back a few times. I don't have gauge either, so I'm sort of using the pattern as a loose guideline, and I'm so proud of myself that I'm able to do that with knitting patterns now. I've done a lot of knitting this year, and I feel so much more confident with knitting. I've mastered cables, German short rows. I've been knitting socks on teeny tiny needles with teeny tiny yarn. Like, I'm so proud of where I've got to with my knitting this year. So yeah, and I cannot wait to wear this cardigan. I haven't talked about the yarn yet. So the yarn, let me just get one for it to show you. So the yarn I got at Yarndale. Yarndale is a sort of crochet knitting yarn event in Yorkshire every September. I've been before. I went in 2016. This was my first year experiencing it as a wheelchair user. If you're a wheelchair user, don't go to Yarndale. The venue is not wheelchair friendly. I got stuck so many times. I'm not going to talk about that though, but we'll talk about the yarn. So the yarn that I'm using is this. I cannot tell you the brand, the fibre content. I got it. I'm going to have a look through the Yarndale leaflet that I've still got to see if I can identify which stall it was. But basically they said, we've bought too much stock, have it really cheap. So there were like 100 gram balls of yarn, pure wool. Oh yeah, I do know the fibre canon. She said it's 100% pure British wool. Don't know the breed. That's all she told me. 100% pure British wool. It was unlabelled. It literally just had DK or 4-ply, literally stuck in these piles of yarn, and it was mad. There were so many people because it was such a good price, because at these events yarn is usually super expensive because it's a lot of hand dyers and hand spinners there. So it was cheap. I got it for £4 per 100 grams. It's a 4-ply yarn, 100% British wool in this gorgeous sort of, it looks a bit brighter on the screen than it does in real life. It's quite a rustic, almost scratchy wool, and I usually struggle with wool that is quite rustic and scratchy because I have very sensitive skin, like with cosmetics and fibres as well. But even though this is a rustic scratchy wool, it doesn't make me itch. It doesn't make me itch. I love it. It doesn't make me itch, and because it's that rustic wool, it doesn't feel like superwash. It feels clingy. It's clinging to each other, each bit. So, and I don't. Have I ever used non-superwash wool before? I must have at some point, but I don't remember. So yeah, so I think it's non-superwash as well. But yeah, so it's 4-ply, but I'm holding 2 strands together, and I'm knitting the cardigan on 5mm needles. So, and for those Americans, 4-ply weight yarn in the UK is the same as your fingering weight. So it's pretty skinny yarn, but with 2 together, it feels like a light Aran or a heavy double knit. So kind of like an Aran or worsted weight yarn together, and I love it. I've got 800 grams. I used, to get to the armpits, I used 2 balls because I'm using 2 together, so I used 200 grams to get to the armpits, and then I think I'm going to be able to get both sleeves out of 2 balls. So that gives me 4 for the body. So it's probably going to be a really lovely long cardigan. I want it as long as I possibly can make it, and I will, even if I have to rip back and redo the hem to use up my yarn, I want to use up as much of this yarn as possible. I want to have a tiny bit left because I want this cardigan to be long, and if it gets past my bottom and it will keep my bottom warm in the winter, then I will be a happy girl. So yeah, I'm really, really excited for this cardigan, and it's knitting up really quickly actually. It's great TV knitting because it's mainly stockinette. So yeah, so that is my I don't really have a name for this, my field day jacket, I guess. And it's my plain cardigan that I cannot wait to make. Is that all of my knitting and crochet to talk about? No, it's not, because I have made progress as well on my Cande Pullover. In my last podcast, I was doing the sleeve, I think I was doing the sleeve, but I have finished both sleeves now. You can see both of my sleeves are finished, which is I'm happy with. I changed the decreases a little bit to get the fit of the sleeve that I wanted, and then I've done some more slip stitch ribbing for the cuffs, which is what the pattern recommends, and I really love how this fits my arms. I'll just show you quickly how it fits my shoulders, because it's what I was saying earlier about having narrow shoulders. I think I'm putting this on the wrong way around. So if you can see how this fits, it might be me, it might be where I've decided to split for the armpits. Let me I stand up a little bit, there we go. So can you see I've just got all this excess fabric here. I don't know if that's me and the armpits should just be higher up, but it just feels quite loose and baggy here, which is such a shame. But this is my first ever round yoke. It's my first ever following someone else's pattern crochet garment. I love how the sleeves fit. They're a little on the short side for me, but I did block the yoke and it added quite a lot of length, so I'm sure that, because I prefer my sleeves to be like here on my cardigans and not here, like where they're sitting at the minute, because that just like, you stretch and it pulls up. So yeah, so I will block this and try and lengthen those sleeves a little bit. And again, I've done the sleeves before I've done the body because I want to use as much yarn as I possibly can. So yeah, so this is the Cande Pullover by Nomad Stitches. It's got this beautiful lace yoke. And I'm using a 2.5mm needle for the main body and then 3.5mm for the ribbing. The yarn that I'm using, have I got any here? Yes, I do. So the yarn that I'm using is Drops Baby Merino, which again is a 4-ply or a fingering weight yarn. It is 100% extra fine merino, and it's this terracotta-y pink colour, but it's kind of heathered a little bit. I don't know if you can see that it's not just a solid colour, it's kind of heathered. It's got like either a paler pink or white fibres in there as well to make it a little bit heathered. It is a beautiful colour. I feel like all of my recent projects have either been a pinky orangey colour or like an orangey coppery colour. They've all been these two colours, so I need to kind of like, my next project needs to be like blue or green or something like that, you know, something a bit different from those colour palettes. I feel like I've done hats, I've done socks, I did fingerless gloves, all of these colours, and I need to chill out a bit and try some different colours. It's like I went through a mustard gold stage earlier this year when everything I was making was sort of like a mustardy yellow colour. So yeah, I'm thinking green for my next crochet or knitted garment, essentially. So that's all of my knitting and crochet. I feel like I've rambled on quite a lot so far, so we're going to run through my new craft that I've been trying, and that is needlepoint. So needlepoint, it's also called needlework, tapestry, pettipoint, gobelin embroidery. There's lots of names for it. In the UK it's usually called tapestry or needlepoint. So this is what I am making. So it is a tapestry or needlepoint cushion. It's by the company Bothy or Bothy, I don't know how to pronounce that, threads. I've actually used some of their cross-stitch kits before, so I have cross-stitched in the past, and I have had it on my craft bucket list. I should probably make a video with like all of the crafts and the projects that like I want to say, like my craft bucket list. So doing a tapestry cushion has been on my bucket list for a long time. I think it was my mum actually that seeded the idea in my head when I showed her some of my cross-stitch a couple of years ago. So because I started cross-stitching in first lockdown in 2020, and I did like these little cross-stitch kits, and I enjoyed it at the time. I did a lot of cross-stitch where, I talked about earlier about having 6 months where I was more than 6 months housebound. I essentially did a lot of cross-stitch then, because my brain couldn't fathom crochet and knitting patterns, and cross-stitch is a little bit easier on my brain. So my mum suggested it to me because I think she used to do it with her grandma. So this is the kit that I'm doing. You can see it's called Botanical Bee, and there's this bee with all of these flowers around. I'll just bring that a little bit closer so you can see. So essentially, needlepoint, if you've ever done a cross-stitch kit, you have like a grid, a chart with symbols or colours on that represent your stitches. So it's pretty much the same with needlepoint, but with needlepoint you just do like a half cross stitch. You just do that sort of teeny tiny diagonal stitch. You can't really see it very well. So that's what I've been working on. My part, these kits are quite expensive, like full price. This kit is £70. My partner got it for, I requested this specific kit because I've been on the lookout for a tapestry kit for a cushion for like over a year, because I wanted to do when it was on my craft bucket list. So, and then I saw this one, this kit came out last year, I think, because it says 2022 on my canvas. So I saw this and I was like, Liam, this is what I want for my birthday, because Liam's not good at surprises. He needs to be told exactly what he's going to get me. So he got me this kit for my birthday in July, and I did start it at the time, but then I did a few colours and then put it down. I wasn't really feeling it, but oh my goodness, the last week I've been doing it because I've hurt myself and I had a few days where I couldn't sit up, so I couldn't crochet. But I could stitch laid on my side, so that's what I've been doing, and I've really enjoyed it. And see how far I've got with it in the last week. I've done so much. It's addictive. Honestly, this is addictive. So this is the canvas, and there is a picture printed on it, but I'm following the chart. I'm loosely following the colours that are printed on it, but I'm following the chart like you would a cross stitch kit. So you can see I've done sort of this. I've just did this wing yesterday. And then I've done around here, so that's sort of the bit that I've done. So if I bring this close to the camera, hopefully you can see. So this is made up of teeny tiny diagonal stitches, and there's a few different ways of making it look like those diagonal stitches on the front. I'm using something called tent stitch. So on the back, like, I think this looks quite messy, but I think it's probably quite neat for a first time try. You can see it's got sort of diagonal stitches as well. So needlepoint essentially is you have a canvas and you do those diagonal stitches in it to make the pattern, and I'll show you. It comes with, I'll show you this. So it comes with, I'll cover up a lot of this chart so to protect copyright. But if you can see, you've got these squares here. So each of those squares represents a stitch. If you've ever done cross stitch before, it's exactly the same. The charts are exactly the same. But with needlepoint, you often have a canvas that's a little bit different to the fabric that you use for cross stitch. And you can use cotton thread for needlepoint. But a lot of tapestry kits, especially the cushion kits, come with wool. And I looked this up just for this podcast, and because I was curious, is what makes tapestry wool different to like knitting wool? So I'll show you what it comes as. So the wool comes as, if you've ever seen like, just cover my face a bit. So it's essentially yarn. So it comes as these. If you've ever used like embroidery thread or embroidery floss before, they come in these little bits. This says it's 10 meters. So I looked up what makes this so different from knitting yarn, and this is made using really high quality, so it's pure wool, it's 100% pure wool, high quality fibres, and they make sure the dye lots are all like exactly the same, it's all exactly the same colour, whereas knitting, You can use sort of like looser fibres, and the dye lots don't necessarily have to be the same. So it's essentially higher quality wool, because when you're pulling this wool through this canvas, it can start to shred it, especially if you leave it too long when you're doing the stitches. You have to have the bit of yarn that you're using quite short. So that's what makes it different. Because I did wonder, because I have a lot of normal yarn, like, can I use it for needlepoint? But essentially yes, but it probably won't do as well as like proper yarn. So this kit came with it. It came with some little, I don't know what these are called. Like little things. And then I have a lot of background colour. And then it also came with some sort of partial, you can see it's all labelled up with the symbol that it corresponds to on the chart. So that's sort of how you know where to go, and use like quite a big blunt needle for it. And it's so addictive. It is so addictive. Honestly, I cannot, once I start, I have to not stitch on this until near the end of the day, because once I start, I just don't get anything else done. Literally don't do anything else, because I just like one more colour, one more row, one more section, one more flower, because it's lots of little flowers. It's just like constantly. Nicole from Common Thread Fibre, she calls it potato chippy, because you just want to keep going back for more. And yeah, she refers to knitting cables like that, but for me, this is potato chippy. I just want to keep going back for more and more and more. And I found it really relaxing and meditative and mindful, because you're just sort of doing the same stitch over and over again. I don't have to think about designs or patterns, or am I gonna, take photos of my progress for Instagram. I can just sort of switch off almost, and that's what I found it really helpful as. And yeah, so I'm really enjoying it. And I'm thinking I might do a little video all about my beginner journey into needlepoint, like maybe when I finish this and what I'm going into next. I've ordered some books. So yeah, so I'm really excited about exploring this new yarn craft. I much prefer it to cross stitch. Cross stitch, usually you use embroidery thread and you do sort of these teeny tiny sort of 14, 16, 18 count stitches per inch. I think this is 10 or 12, and you're using yarn. It's so much easier to see, especially like in lower lights. I just find this so much, A, it's quicker, B, it's easier to see, and I get to use yarn. And if you didn't already, I really love yarn. So the fact that I can now use yarn to essentially do something like a cross stitch kit is great, because I much prefer this. I was going to do a tapestry cushion and leave it. That was on my bucket list. Like, I'm just going to do it and leave it. But I actually think I might get into this and have another craft going on at the same time as my other stuff. But I really love it. So I've ordered some books. So yeah, we'll see what project I'll come up with next. But yeah, once I've finished this and I've made it into a cushion, I'll do a video about needlepoint. We'll have a look through the books that I've ordered. We'll have a look online at some other charts and patterns. So yeah, if you're looking for a new yarn craft to try, maybe give needlepoint a go, because it's so relaxing, and I don't really see a lot of it. I don't know if it's just because I'm not in those circles, but I don't really see a lot of it online. So it's potentially, yeah, something that I might enjoy making content about. Probably not tutorials, because I'm like ultimate beginner, like my attention is all over the place. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, that's my needlepoint journey so far. Watch this space. I have also, my partner's got a punch needle kit he's given me that he doesn't want, because he bought it to try and decided so my partner really loves cross stitch, and he wants to try embroidery, and he does want to try needlepoint at some point. So yeah, he's got some stuff he said I can have, because he doesn't want to do punch needle anymore. So I'm going to have a go at punch needle as well, which is a lot quicker than this, but does use like sort of yarn on fabric as well. So yeah, I love these sorts of crafts, not just crochet and knitting, but especially like hand sewing crafts. It makes me feel connected with women of previous generations. And I know that maybe comes across as sexist, I don't know, because my partner really enjoys cross-stitch and embroidery. So yeah, it just makes me feel connected with those generations that came before us, when this was sort of what they did for entertainment, especially sort of those sort of middle to upper class women in like Victorian times. That is, needlepoint was really popular then. So doing stuff like this and like when I was hand sewing a quilt last year, it makes me feel more connected to to womanhood, I guess, as a whole. So on that note, let's end this long and rambling podcast here. I'm sorry it's been so long and rambly and disorganised and all over the place, but that's kind of how my brain is at the minute. So yeah, next month's podcast we're not going to be doing the usual podcast because this month I'm going to be doing making a lot of Christmas presents and finishing off Christmas presents that I don't want to show on this podcast because my family watches these podcasts. So next month's podcast, we're going to go through all of the crochet blankets that I've made that I still have in my house, and I'm going to run through them, all the yarn, the pattern I used, and how you can make them as well. So if you've liked this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up down below and subscribe if you want to see my future crafty content. I will see you next time.